Listen carefully because this isn't a speech you just hear with your ears. It's the kind of truth you feel vibrating in your chest long after the words stop. There is a dangerous, almost laughable misconception out there about what it means to be an empath. Most people look at you and see someone soft. They see someone they think they can manipulate, someone easy to lean on until they break, someone who will just keep absorbing the impact of their bad behavior. They mistake your kindness for a lack of a backbone and your patience for a lack of options. That is the single biggest mistake they will ever make. They didn't realize that they weren't dealing with someone fragile. They were dealing with someone who is hyper-aware. Your empathy was never a soft spot. It was a high-level surveillance system. You need to understand that your ability to feel isn't a burden. It's a superpower that operates on a frequency most people can't even comprehend. While others are busy listening to the words coming out of a person's mouth, you are busy reading the energy behind them. You read people like they are open books. You sense the lie while it's still being formed in their mind. You feel the shift in the room before a single word is spoken. You see the hidden motives, the subtle disrespect, and the jagged edges of their character long before they show them to the world. And yet, for a long time, you still chose kindness. You still chose to be the person who understood, who forgave, and who gave the benefit of the doubt. That wasn't because you were too weak to fight back. It was because you had the discipline to stay true to yourself. It takes zero effort to be cruel, but it takes a warrior's heart to see the darkness in someone and still offer them light. But here is the part where they miscalculated the most. They thought that light was infinite. They thought they could keep taking and taking without ever giving anything back. They assumed that because you are an empath, you are destined to be a permanent doormat for their insecurities. What they failed to understand is that every empath has a limit, and once you cross it, there is no return policy. When an empath is pushed too far, they don't shatter like glass. They transform like steel in a furnace. You gave them more chances than they ever deserved. You looked past their flaws. You made excuses for their bad behavior, and you tried to heal the wounds they were using as an excuse to hurt you. You stayed when anyone else would have walked away, not because you were stuck, but because you were hoping they would finally choose to be better. Every betrayal you endured didn't just hurt you, it rewired you. Every lie they told acted like a whetstone, sharpening your focus and refining your intuition. Every time they tried to gaslight you or play games with your emotions, they were actually training you to spot their tactics from a mile away. They thought they were breaking you down, but they were actually building a version of you that is completely untouchable. One day, a switch flipped deep inside your soul. It wasn't a loud explosion. It was a quiet, cold realization that your peace is worth more than their chaos. And when that switch flips for an empath, the patient version of you dies. It doesn't come back. There is no amount of apologizing or pleading that can resurrect the person who used to give them unlimited emotional discounts. By trying to exploit your kindness, they effectively destroyed the only person who was truly on their side. They broke the version of you that was gentle and patient, and in its place, they forced the birth of a version that sees every single thing they do. You no longer have, quote, blind spots for people you love. You no longer ignore the red flags because you want to see the, quote, good in them. Now, you see the reality of who they are, not the potential of who they could be. You see the patterns, the micro-expressions, and the hidden agendas instantly. They wanted to see how far they could push you, and now they have to live with the person you became to survive them. A person who is calm, aware, and completely done with the games. They didn't just lose your presence, they lost the privilege of your empathy, and that is a debt they can never repay. They looked at your silence and made the ultimate mistake. They mistook it for a lack of intelligence. Because you weren't shouting, defending yourself, or pointing out every little lie, they genuinely believed they were getting away with it. They sat there feeling smug, thinking they had successfully pulled the wool over your eyes. But the truth is far more dangerous for them. You weren't missing their games, you were documenting them. While they were busy performing, you were the audience member who knew exactly how the trick was done. They mistook your patience for permission to keep pushing, assuming that because you didn't create a scene, you didn't have a clue. They felt a false sense of security, a loud confidence that they were the smartest person in the room, never realizing that your calm was actually a high-level observation deck. You were busy collecting data, tracking their inconsistencies, and watching the patterns of their behavior repeat like a broken record. You weren't being quiet because you were confused. You were being quiet because you were letting them finish revealing exactly who they are. Silence isn't a void, it is a weapon of absolute precision. Most people feel an overwhelming itch to speak, to correct, or to prove they're right. But you mastered the ability to sit in the stillness and just watch. This is the ultimate form of self-control. While they were spiraling, getting sloppy, and losing control of their own narrative, you were becoming a master of your own inner world. You realized early on that every time you react to a manipulator, you are handing them a gift. When you get angry, you show them where your buttons are. When you explain your hurt, you give them a roadmap of your vulnerabilities. When you argue, you give them the opportunity to twist your words and flip the script. By choosing not to react, you effectively cut off their oxygen supply. You realize that a reaction is a piece of information, and by denying them that information, you became a total enigma. You became the one thing a manipulator cannot handle, a person who is completely unreadable. By staying centered and refusing to take the bait, you became their absolute worst nightmare. Manipulators and toxic people thrive on feedback loops. They need to see that they have an effect on you to feel powerful. They need to see you flustered, upset, or defensive to know their tactics are working. But when you offer them a blank stare or a calm, unwavering presence, they start to panic. They have nothing to attach to, no hook to sink in, and no way to predict what you're thinking. Your silence didn't just protect your peace, it acted as a mirror that forced them to see their own chaos. They started testing your limits even harder, trying to get any spark of emotion out of you. But the more they tried, the more they exposed their own desperation. You weren't playing the same game they were. While they were playing checkers, trying to win small emotional points, you were playing the long game of self-mastery. In the end, your self-control simply outlasted their stamina. It takes a massive amount of energy to maintain a lie, to manipulate a situation, or to keep up a false front. But it takes very little energy to simply sit in the truth and wait. You didn't have to defeat them in a traditional sense. You just had to outweight them. You watched as they tripped over their own stories and tangled themselves in their own webs. Because you stayed unmovable, they eventually ran out of moves. They realized that they couldn't control you because they couldn't even get a rise out of you. That is the true power of controlled silence. It isn't about being passive. It's about being so grounded in your own reality that no amount of outside noise can shake your foundation. You reached a level where you no longer needed to prove they were wrong, because you were satisfied enough with simply knowing you were right. You let them talk their way right out of your life, and that was the most powerful move you ever made. Pain didn't enter your life to break you down or leave you in ruins, even if it felt like it at the time. It arrived with a much more clinical purpose. It came to calibrate you. Think of it like a lens being snapped into focus. Before this, your vision was blurry. You saw what you wanted to see in people rather than what was actually there. Every single lie you uncovered, every time you felt your soul being drained by someone else's chaos, and every night you spent wondering why your kindness wasn't enough, none of that was wasted energy. It was all raw material being used to build a sophisticated filter inside your mind. You were being upgraded. You were learning that empathy without boundaries is just self-destruction, and pain was the only teacher loud enough to make you listen. It forced you to stop looking at the world through the foggy glass of hope and started making you look at it through the clear glass of reality. As this evolution took hold, you experienced a massive internal shift in how you value people. You finally stopped attaching yourself to quote-unquote potential. You stopped falling in love with the person someone could be if they just changed their entire personality, and you started looking at who they actually are right now. You realized that potential is just a fantasy that keeps you trapped in toxic cycles. Instead, you started measuring one thing and one thing only: consistency. You stopped being moved by grand gestures and poetic apologies because you realized that words are free and easy to fake. You started requiring proof. If their actions didn't line up with their words, you stopped listening to the words entirely. This isn't you becoming cold or bitter. It's you becoming precise. It's like a surgeon who has to be sharp and clinical to save a life. In this case, the life you are saving is your own. You've simply reached a point where you refuse to accept anything less than the truth. This evolution led you to the most important realization of all. Not everyone deserves the same version of you. You used to give the best, most vulnerable, most supportive parts of yourself to anyone who walked through the door, regardless of whether they had earned it. Pain taught you that your energy is a finite, precious resource, not a public utility. You started building a tiered system for your heart. Some people get your politeness, some get your time, but only a very few, the ones who have proven their character over time, get your genuine empathy and deep soul. You stopped handing out emotional discounts to people who treated you like an option. You realized that protecting your peace isn't an act of aggression against others. It's an act of deep respect for yourself. You stopped apologizing for having standards, and you stopped feeling guilty for walking away from situations that no longer served your growth. The most incredible thing about this shift is that it's quiet, but it is absolutely permanent. It's not a loud, screaming change. It's a deep, foundational settling into your own skin. You have finally aligned your actions with your self-respect, and that alignment changes the way you interact with every person you meet. It means you no longer feel the desperate need to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You've realized that when someone wants to see you as the villain, no amount of logic or kindness will change their mind, so you just stop trying. You let them be wrong. You've officially lost the version of yourself that used to ignore red flags and make excuses for the inexcusable. And while losing that version of yourself might have felt like a death, it was actually a birth. You made room for an untouchable version of yourself, one that doesn't just feel, but understands. Once your eyes are open to the truth of human behavior, they never truly close again. You can't go back to being unaware. You've graduated from the school of pain, and you've walked away with a level of wisdom that nobody can ever take from you. The most misunderstood form of power in this world isn't a loud voice, an aggressive stance, or a cutting insult. It is distance. But you need to understand that this isn't the kind of distance born out of a temper tantrum or a momentary burst of anger. It isn't a silent treatment used to manipulate someone into coming back. This is distance born of absolute, razor-sharp clarity. Most people are fully prepared for a fight. When they wrong you, they are already rehearsing their defenses, sharpening their excuses, and preparing their counterattacks. They expect you to come at them with heat because your anger gives them something to work with. It gives them a hook to keep you engaged in their drama. But they are never, ever prepared for a quiet, total withdrawal. When you simply stop showing up, when you cease to offer your voice to the conflict, you are taking the power back in a way that words never could. By detaching, you are removing the one thing that these people depend on to feel relevant: your energy. You have to realize that for a manipulator or a toxic personality, your reaction is their oxygen. Whether that reaction is love, anger, tears, or frustration, it doesn't matter. As long as you are reacting, they still have a grip on you. They are still influencing your internal state. But the moment you detach, their influence doesn't just shrink, it evaporates. It's like a fire being deprived of air. They can keep screaming, keep poking, and keep trying to provoke you. But if you aren't there to receive it, the energy has nowhere to go. It just falls flat. You are no longer providing the fuel they need to keep their games going. And that is when they truly lose their grip on the situation. It is vital to understand that emotional detachment isn't about becoming a cold, unfeeling robot. It isn't about losing your humanity. It is about becoming extremely selective with where your humanity goes. You have finally reached the realization that your attention is the most valuable currency you own, and you have decided to stop spending it on people who provide a 0% return on your investment. You've stopped throwing your pearls before people who only want to trample them. This shift means you no longer feel the desperate, frantic need to win the argument or prove that you are right. Why? Because you already know the truth. You've seen the patterns, you've felt the energy, and you've reached your conclusion. When you know the truth in your bones, you don't need an admission of guilt from the other person to feel validated. Knowing is enough. By choosing to disengage, you are setting a boundary that is final because it doesn't require their permission or their understanding. Most people think a boundary is something you negotiate, something you explain over and over again, hoping the other person finally gets it. But the ultimate boundary is simply removing yourself. It requires no explanation. You don't need to send a long paragraph explaining why you're leaving or why you're done. You just move. You are no longer operating from a needy place of, "Please understand me," or "Please see my side." Instead, you are operating from a solid, unshakable standard of self-worth. You've realized that your peace is a closed circle, and if someone cannot respect the entry requirements, they simply don't get access. You aren't closing your heart, you're just moving it out of the reach of people who only know how to mishandle it. That is the ultimate power move, being so sure of your own value that you don't even stay to hear their final excuse. In the end, what they misunderstood as your weakness was actually the foundation of your new, unshakable strength. You haven't become someone they can no longer reach. You've become someone they no longer deserve to reach. This transformation wasn't about building a wall to hide behind, but about developing a filter that ensures only the genuine can stay. You've traded the exhausting need for external validation for the quiet, lethal power of internal certainty. You now move through the world with a different frequency, one that doesn't react to every provocation or bleed for every betrayal. You are the master of your own energy, the gatekeeper of your own peace, and the absolute authority on your own worth. The version of you that tolerated disrespect is officially a memory, and the version that stands here today is calibrated, controlled, and completely untouchable. Now it is time to stop looking back at the wreckage of what they tried to do and start leaning into the power of who you have become. Stop explaining yourself to the people who are committed to seeing you as the villain and start investing that energy into your own evolution. If this message resonates with the fire inside you, then let this be the moment you draw the final line in the sand. Claim your space, protect your peace, and never apologize for the boundaries that keep you whole. Follow this journey and join a community of those who have turned their empathy into their greatest advantage. It's time to stop surviving the games of others and start winning at your own life. Lean into your awareness, trust your gut without hesitation, and move forward with the quiet confidence of someone who finally knows exactly who they are.